Every year, millions of people reach a breaking point with Windows. Maybe it's the forced updates, the ads baked into the start menu, or Windows 11 locking out older hardware that runs perfectly fine. Whatever the reason, a growing number of people are done, and they're landing on Linux Mint. By the time you're through this guide, you will have a working Linux Mint installation, and you'll understand how to use it as your daily driver without missing Windows at all. You don't need an IT degree or a command line expertise. Just a USB drive, a spare hour, and a willingness to try something that about 4 million people are already using every day. Linux Mint has been the most downloaded desktop Linux distribution on DistroWatch for several years running, and 2026 is genuinely the most beginner-friendly it has ever been. The team behind it released Linux Mint 22 inches mid-2024, based on Ubuntu 24.04, which means you're sitting on top of one of the most stable and well-supported code bases in the open-source world. Linux Mint started in 2006. A developer named Clement Lefebvre built it specifically because he felt that Ubuntu, which was already beginner-friendly by Linux standards, still had rough edges that kept regular people away. His goal was a desktop operating system that anyone could pick up and use without touching a terminal window. The result is an operating system that looks, in many ways, like a more competent version of Windows 10. There's a taskbar at the bottom, a start menu-style application launcher in the bottom left corner, a system tray on the right, and a desktop where you can put shortcuts. If you've used Windows for the last decade, the visual logic will feel immediately familiar. Mint comes in 3 desktop environments. The most popular is called Cinnamon, and it's the one this guide focuses on. Cinnamon is what the Mint team builds and maintains themselves. The other 2, Mate and XFCE, are lighter-weight options better suited to older or lower-powered hardware. If you're on a computer from 2015 or later with at least 4 gigabytes of RAM, Cinnamon will run fine. Under the hood, Linux Mint 22 runs on top of Ubuntu 24.04 LTS, which itself is built on the Linux kernel 6.8. This matters practically because Ubuntu has the largest support ecosystem of any Linux desktop distribution. When a piece of hardware works on Ubuntu, it almost certainly works on Mint. When a software package is available for Ubuntu, it's almost certainly available on Mint too. The minimum hardware requirements for Linux Mint 22 Cinnamon are 2 gigabytes of RAM and 20 gigabytes of storage, but those are bare minimums. In practice, you want at least 4 gigabytes of RAM for a comfortable experience and 50 gigabytes of free disk space if Linux Mint will be your primary system. There's one hardware check that trips up a lot of people, and it's worth doing before you spend any time downloading an ISO file. On modern computers, especially ones that shipped with Windows 10 or 11, there's a setting called Secure Boot and another called Fast Boot, both controlled in your UEFI firmware. Some Linux Mint versions install fine with Secure Boot enabled, but many people run into problems. The safest approach is to disable both before you begin and re-enable them after installation if you need to. To get into your UEFI settings, restart your computer and press the key it shows on screen during startup. This is usually Delete, F2, F10, or F12, depending on your manufacturer. Once inside, look for a Security or Boot tab and turn off Secure Boot and Fast Boot. Save and exit. One more thing to check. If your laptop uses an NVIDIA graphics card, note that down. It doesn't mean Linux Mint won't work. It will. But there are a few extra steps during and after installation that we'll cover. To download Linux Mint, go to linuxmint.com and click the download link. You'll see the 3 editions, Cinnamon, Mate, and XFCE. Choose Cinnamon. On the next page, you'll see a list of mirrors. These are just different servers hosting the same file. Pick one that's geographically close to you and click it. The file you're downloading is an ISO image, roughly 2.8 gigabytes. While it downloads, verify the checksum. On the download page, Mint provides a SHA-256 checksum, a unique fingerprint for the file. After downloading, you can verify this on Windows using a tool called certutil in PowerShell, or on a Mac using the shasum command in Terminal. This step confirms the file wasn't corrupted during download and hasn't been tampered with. It takes about 30 seconds, and it's worth doing. You need a USB drive with at least 8 gigabytes of space. Everything currently on that drive will be erased, so back up anything important. The recommended tool for creating the bootable drive is called Balena Etcher. It's free, It runs on Windows and Mac OS, and it has 3 steps. Select the ISO, select the USB drive, flash. That's it. Within about 10 minutes, you'll have a bootable Linux Mint USB. Now, we come to booting into the live environment. This is where a lot of people get nervous for the first time, and there's no need. Linux Mint includes a full live environment, meaning you can boot directly into a working desktop from the USB drive and try everything without touching your existing hard drive at all. Plug the USB drive into your computer, restart, and boot from it. How you do this varies by manufacturer. On most systems, you can press F12 during startup to get a one-time boot menu, then select the USB drive. If that doesn't work, you'll need to go back into the UEFI settings and change the boot order so the USB drive comes first. Once Mint loads from the USB, you'll see a full desktop. Connect to Wi-Fi, open the browser, and look around. Everything is running entirely from the USB drive. This is your chance to verify that your hardware works, your touchpad, your Wi-Fi, and your display resolution. If something major doesn't work here, it likely won't work after installation either, and you can research a fix before committing. Take at least 10 minutes here. Don't rush into installation. When you're ready, double-click the Install Linux Mint icon on the desktop. The installer will walk you through several screens. Most are straightforward. Choose your language, your keyboard layout, and your time zone. The screen that deserves your full attention is the installation type screen. You'll see at least 2 main options: install Linux Mint alongside your existing OS, or erase disk and install Linux Mint. If you want a dual boot setup, meaning you can choose between Windows and Linux Mint each time you start your computer, choose the first option. The installer will handle the partitioning for you. You'll be asked how much disk space to allocate to Linux Mint. Give it at least 50 gigabytes, more if you plan to install a lot of software or store files there. If you want Linux Mint to be your only operating system, choose Erase Disk. This will wipe everything on the drive. Make absolutely certain you have backed up anything you want to keep before choosing this option. There's a checkbox on this screen that says Encrypt the new Linux Mint installation for security. If you're installing on a laptop that could be stolen, this is worth enabling. It adds a password prompt at boot. The performance impact on modern hardware is negligible. Click Install now, confirm the partition changes, set up your username and password, and let the installer run. On a modern machine with a fast drive, installation takes about 10 to 15 minutes. When it finishes, it will ask you to remove the USB drive and press Enter. Your computer will restart into your new Linux Mint system. The first time you log in, a welcome screen will appear. Don't close it immediately. It has links to several useful setup steps. The most important one is the Driver Manager. Click the Driver Manager link. The system will scan your hardware and show you what proprietary drivers are available. If you have an NVIDIA graphics card, you'll see it listed here. Select the recommended driver, usually the one labeled Tested, click Apply, and let it install. This takes a few minutes. Restart when it's done. After the restart, open the Update Manager. It will have a shield icon in the system tray at the bottom right. Linux Mint will show you available updates grouped by risk level. Apply all Level 1 through Level 3 updates, which are the ones Mint itself has tested and recommends. Do this before you install any new software. Getting your system up to date on day one prevents a long tail of minor problems. Linux Mint has an application called the Software Manager. Think of it as an app store. It's in your application menu. Open it, search for anything you need, and click Install. That's all. For most common tasks, the free alternatives are excellent. LibreOffice comes pre-installed and handles Word, Excel, and PowerPoint files with reasonable compatibility. For a browser, Firefox is pre-installed. Chrome is available in the Software Manager. VLC plays every video format. GIMP handles photo editing. Spotify has a native Linux client available through the Software Manager. If something isn't in the Software Manager, it may be available as a deb package, a file that ends in deb that installs like an executable on Windows. You download it, double-click it, and the installer opens. Many commercial applications, including Slack, Discord, and VS Code, distribute Linux deb packages directly from their websites. There's also a technology called Flatpak, which Mint 22 supports out of the box. Flatpak packages are self-contained applications that run on any Linux distribution. If something isn't available as a deb, check flathub.org, the central Flatpak repository. The selection there is extensive and growing. Let's be direct about what will feel unfamiliar, because pretending there's no learning curve would be dishonest. File management is slightly different. Linux doesn't have drive letters like C or D. Instead, everything lives under a single directory structure starting from the root, written as a /. Your home folder, where your documents, downloads, and desktop files live, is at home, your username. The Files app in Mint is intuitive, and you'll spend most of your time there. But knowing this matters when you're troubleshooting. Software installation occasionally requires the terminal. Not often, but occasionally. If a set of instructions tells you to open a terminal and type a command, don't panic. The terminal in Linux Mint is called the terminal. It's in your application menu, and most commands you'll ever need are single lines that you copy and paste. The most common one you'll see is sudo apt install, followed by a program name. Sudo means do this with administrator privileges. Apt is the package manager. That command installs software from Ubuntu's official repositories. Gaming has improved dramatically. Linux Mint supports Steam natively. Valve's Proton compatibility layer, which translates Windows game code to run on Linux, now supports tens of thousands of games. The ProtonDB website at protonb.com lets you search any game and see real user reports on how well it runs. Many games run at full performance, some don't run at all. Before you commit to Linux as a gaming platform, check the games you care about on ProtonDB first. Printing works for most modern printers automatically. USB printers almost always just work when you plug them in. Network printers occasionally need manual setup through the printer's control panel. If you have an older printer, check the Open Printing database at openprinting.org to verify there's a driver available before you switch. Linux Mint requires very little ongoing maintenance compared to Windows. There's no disk defragmentation, the file system doesn't need it, there's no registry to clean. There are no antivirus subscriptions required, though the threat model for Linux desktops is genuinely lower than Windows, not zero. The Update Manager will notify you when updates are available. Apply them regularly. Mint releases major versions every 2 years on the LTS Ubuntu cycle, and each version receives security updates for 5 years. Mint 22, released in 2024, is supported until 2029. You won't be forced to upgrade to stay secure. About once a year, open the Software Manager and click Installed to review what you've installed. Remove things you no longer use. It keeps the system clean and reduces your attack surface. One habit worth building early. Use the Timeshift backup tool, which comes pre-installed in Mint 22. Timeshift takes snapshots of your system state, like System Restore in Windows, but it is more reliable. Set it to take weekly snapshots automatically. If an update ever causes a problem, you can roll back to a previous snapshot in minutes. It has saved many users hours of troubleshooting. The Linux Mint community is one of the most helpful in the open source world. The official forums at forums.linuxmint.com are active and well moderated. When you post a question, include your Mint version, your hardware, and the exact error message you're seeing. You'll usually get a useful response within a few hours. For hardware-specific problems, especially anything involving Wi-Fi cards or NVIDIA graphics, the Ubuntu forums and Ask Ubuntu at askubuntu.com are equally useful because Mint and Ubuntu share the same software base. One practical tip: before you post a question anywhere, copy the exact error message you're seeing and paste it into a search engine with the word Linux Mint or Ubuntu in the query. The vast majority of problems you'll encounter in your first month have been solved and documented by someone before you. The answer is usually one search away. Linux Mint in 2026 is a serious, stable, and well-supported operating system that ordinary people use as their daily driver. The installation is straightforward if you follow the steps in the right order. Disable Secure Boot. Create your USB drive with Etcher. Try the live environment before committing. Install, update immediately, and handle drivers first. The learning curve is real but shallow. The things that are different from Windows, the file structure, the occasional terminal command, the package manager, take an afternoon to get comfortable with, not weeks. Here's your action for today. Go to linuxmint.com and download the Cinnamon edition. You don't have to install it today. Just boot from the USB drive and spend 20 minutes using the live environment. That's the lowest stakes way to find out whether this is right for you. If this guide helped you, share it with someone who's been complaining about their current operating system. And if you've already made the switch, drop a comment below with what finally pushed you to do it. Those stories are genuinely useful to people who are still deciding.